under the twin suns of Arcturus. 9. The desert shimmered like a furnace of glass. Heat ghosts danced above the firing range where rows of Terran and alien soldiers lay prone behind rifles, their armor baked in dust the color of old copper. The air tasted of metal and grit. Every breath rasped. The coalition instructors claimed the range simulated real combat conditions, though everyone knew it was more of a contest. A friendly one, but still a contest of pride between species. Lieutenant Mara Vance adjusted the sling on her shoulder, saying nothing. She moved with that quiet precision that made her seem detached from the chaos around her. The wind tugged at the edge of her visor hood as she knelt beside her rifle, an old-fashioned rail-coil hybrid. Its matte barrel reflected none of the sun's glare. She ran a thumb along the stock as though the weapon were a living thing. Around her, soldiers joked and cursed and spat into the sand, but she let their voices fade. Downrange, the target shimmered, a grapefruit-sized drone hovering 3,600 meters away. It flickered every few seconds to test visual tracking. 15 marksmen had already failed to touch it. The scoreboards glowed with misses, streaks of blue plasma scattering into the wind, disintegrating long before impact. A towering Navy SEAL in full combat rig strode along the line, his boots crunching through the dust. His name tag read Brogan, though everyone simply called him the instructor. He carried authority the way others carried weapons. Visible, heavy, and unyielding. "That's 15 down," he barked, grinning behind mirrored lenses. "Any snipers want to try? Or should we ask the machines to do it for us?" Laughter rippled through the ranks. Even the Zalorian cadets, whose chitinous faces barely moved, clicked their mandibles in amusement. A faint mechanical chuckle rose from a nearby observer drone as it replayed the last miss in exaggerated slow motion. Mara felt the sound vibrate in her chest, but didn't react. Her eyes stayed on the horizon where heat blurred everything into movement. The SEAL's challenge wasn't cruel, it was ritual. Every training cycle ended with one outrageous test that no one was supposed to meet. It kept egos balanced. But this time, the silence that followed his taunt lingered a little too long. No one reached for their rifle. Brogan turned slowly, scanning the group. "Come on, Terrans. Don't tell me the aliens are the only ones with guts today." He let his gaze settle on Mara, who stood out only because she wasn't laughing. "Lieutenant Vance, right? You've been real quiet. You want to give it a go?" A few heads turned. Some smirked. A Zalorian leaned toward his companion and whispered through mandible clicks. "The human female has not spoken all morning. Perhaps she fears the distance." Mara didn't rise to the bait. She simply met Brogan's mirrored gaze, then nodded once. The movement was small but final. She knelt beside the firing mat, checked the rifle's balance, and keyed the scope's display to manual. Brogan chuckled. "Manual? You sure you don't want the AI assist, Lieutenant? Even the bugs use it." "Manual," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady, a single note against the wind. "Your call," he said, stepping back. "Range is hot." The chatter died instantly. The desert wind whispered over the range in long, sighing breaths. Mara flattened her body behind the rifle, one cheek resting on the cool metal. Through the scope, the world shrank to crosshairs and distortion lines. The target flickered like a mirage. She exhaled, slow and even, letting her pulse match the faint hum of the coil chamber. Her mind ticked through calculations, not as numbers but as instinctive rhythms. The twin suns created competing thermals. She felt them in the way the sand pressed against her elbows. The wind gusted from the northeast, funneled by the ridge line half a kilometer away. Dust spirals rose and fell in uneven cycles, and she marked the timing in her head. Behind her, one of the alien observers whispered, "Her readings are offline. She's refusing telemetry." Brogan crossed his arms, watching with an expression that hovered between curiosity and amusement. He'd seen too many soldiers rely on tech they didn't understand. Maybe it would be good for morale to watch an old school attempt crash and burn. Mara tuned out the voices. She thought of Earth, of the range back in New Mexico, where her father had taught her to shoot before she'd ever held a service rifle. "You don't read the wind," he'd said. "You feel it, like listening to someone breathe." The memory steadied her. She set her finger lightly on the trigger guard and adjusted the elevation by less than a hair. The rifle's sensors offered silent corrections, but she ignored them. Machines predicted averages. She trusted edges. The drone downrange wobbled slightly in a cross-current. That was the moment. She didn't think, didn't analyze, didn't calculate further. She simply knew. Her finger tightened, then froze. She let a breath leave her lungs until it vanished completely, the instant between heartbeats where the body becomes still. Someone muttered behind her, "She's not firing." Brogan raised a hand for silence. Mara squeezed. The rail coil discharged with a sound like thunder tearing through glass. A blue streak ripped through the haze, gone almost before it existed. The recoil kicked against her shoulder, solid but familiar. She didn't lift her head, didn't blink. The air smelled of ozone and scorched dust. Through the scope, she watched nothing but the mirage dance. Then, impossibly faint, came the glint, an afterimage of light, followed by a microflash as the drone's stabilizers flared. Brogan's grin faltered. The alien observers leaned forward, mandibles clicking rapid calculations. "Impact," one hissed. No confirmation yet. The tracking drones hesitated, recalculating trajectory. The blue streak had vanished from sensors mid-flight, as though the shot had bent out of range. Mara remained motionless, waiting. Her heart was slow, her mind quiet. Finally, at the far edge of the desert, a puff of metallic dust erupted, a single, silent bloom. The target dropped out of the sky. Gasps rose across the line. The scoreboard flashed a single bright mark. Hit 600M. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Brogan exhaled, low and almost reverent. "Well, I'll be damned." Mara sat up, ejecting the spent coil cartridge. It hit the mat with a soft clink. She didn't smile. She simply began dismantling her rifle, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Behind her, the whispers began, human, alien, metallic. How did she calculate the drift without telemetry? She anticipated random turbulence. That's statistically impossible. Brogan approached, helmet tucked under his arm. "Nice shot, Lieutenant." His tone was less a compliment than an admission. Guess the quiet ones still have teeth. She looked up briefly, the corner of her mouth tightening into something not quite a smile. "Just wind," she said, "and a little luck." He chuckled. "Sure, let's call it that." As he walked back to the line, the soldiers still murmured, replaying the shot on their HUDs. The footage showed something none of them could explain, a deviation in the slug trajectory that corrected itself mid-flight, following an unseen rhythm of the storm. Mara packed her rifle and rose, brushing dust from her knee. The suns were dipping lower, shadows stretching across the range. She didn't look back at the others. The cheers hadn't started yet, but they would. For now, the silence felt cleaner, sharper, like the pause between heartbeats when everything that matters has already been decided. The desert had gone silent after the shot, the kind of silence that seemed to hum inside the skull. Even the wind, always restless, had paused as though waiting for confirmation of what it had just witnessed. Then the murmurs began, rippling outward in disbelief. Data drones swarmed the downrange area, scanning the scorched patch where the target had vaporized. The scoreboards flickered again. No error, no misread. A confirmed hit at 3,600 meters. Lieutenant Mara Vance removed her gloves with deliberate calm. Her hands were steady, her breathing even, but a pulse of heat still lingered beneath her ribs. She'd taken long shots before, but none with so many eyes on her. None in front of aliens who believed intuition was a myth and humans were reckless creatures who gambled with luck instead of reason. Around her, whispers grew louder. Words like impossible, unrecorded variance, statistical outlier cut through the haze. Brogan stepped closer, his helmet tucked under one arm, a grin tugging at the edge of his mouth. "You just made a lot of computers very unhappy, Lieutenant." His voice was half amusement, half awe. Mara kept her tone neutral. The wind helped. Sure, he said. Let's blame the weather. He gestured toward the alien observers gathered near the data monitors. They're trying to figure out if you cheated physics. You realize that. I didn't cheat anything, she said, beginning to reassemble her rifle. I just stopped trusting the math before it lied to me. Brogan laughed, short and sharp. I like that. Sounds like something my old sergeant would have said before a fight. He leaned in, lowering his voice. You ever think about teaching? The rookies could use some of that instinct of yours. I'm not sure it's teachable, Mara said. She tightened a screw on the coil housing and slotted the rifle back into its case. By now, the alien officers had crossed the range. The lead among them, Zalorian captain with gleaming carapace plates, inclined his head toward Mara. His translator unit rendered his words in precise, metallic tones. Lieutenant Vance, your projectile altered course beyond predictive tolerance levels. Explain your method. Mara glanced at Brogan, who gave her an amused shrug. She met the alien's opaque eyes. There's no method. I read the wind and waited for a lull. The Zalorian's mandibles clicked in irritation. Your sensors were disabled. Correct. Then your reading was inaccurate. It worked. The alien paused, processing the contradiction. Human intuition, he said finally, tasting the phrase like a foreign spice. A primitive adaptation. Brogan's grin widened. Primitive, huh? Well, that primitive just beat your best shooters. A few human soldiers chuckled. The Zalorian ignored them, his focus fixed on Mara. Your kind prides itself on unpredictability. Yet unpredictability is inefficiency. The probability of repeating such success is negligible. Mara snapped the final latch on her case. Maybe, but sometimes negligible is enough. He studied her for a moment longer, then turned away, the plates along his back clicking in agitation. His entourage followed, leaving a faint scent of ozone in their wake. Brogan watched them go, then glanced back at her. You just started a debate that'll keep them arguing for weeks. That wasn't my goal. Doesn't matter. You prove something they don't want to believe. That instinct still has a place in the field. He tilted his head toward the downrange expanse. They'll probably run simulations for days, trying to recreate what you did. They won't. Why not? Because they'll keep looking for a formula. There isn't one. The instructor studied her expression, noting the calm certainty there. Beneath the reserved tone, he saw something else. A quiet defiance that didn't come from arrogance, but from survival. She'd lived long enough in chaos to understand that order was an illusion people built to feel safe. A sharp chirp came from the nearby monitor. The footage from the shot had been stabilized and replayed on the main display. Everyone gathered instinctively around it. The screen showed the moment the projectile left Mara's rifle, a luminous streak cutting through waves of heat distortion. Then, halfway across the range, the slug seemed to veer slightly, a correction invisible to the naked eye but obvious under magnification. The path curved by a fraction of a degree, just enough to compensate for a dust vortex the sensors hadn't predicted. Brogan let out a low whistle. That's not luck. Maybe not, Mara said quietly. One of the alien technicians turned toward her. How did you perceive the microcurrents before trajectory deviation? I didn't perceive them, she said. I felt them. The alien blinked slowly. That is not a measurable input. It doesn't have to be. The technician muttered something in his language and stalked away. The others followed, murmuring about recalibration protocols. When they were gone, Brogan shook his head, grinning again. I think you just ruined their week. I'm sure they'll recover. He chuckled, then sobered slightly. You ever wonder why you can do that? It's something no machine can even track. Mara looked out over the desert, where the twin suns bled orange into the horizon. Because machines don't care if they miss, she said after a long moment. We do. That seemed to settle something between them. Brogan nodded, thoughtful. The wind picked up again, carrying sand that whispered over their boots. A transport drone descended in the distance, kicking up dust. The day's exercises were ending, but no one seemed eager to leave. Soldiers lingered in small groups, talking quietly, replaying the footage on their visors. For once, It wasn't about competition between humans and aliens. It was about possibility. Mara slung her rifle case over her shoulder and started toward the waiting transport. Brogan fell into step beside her. "You know, this story's going to travel fast," he said. "By tomorrow, they'll be calling you the 3-6 sniper." She gave a faint smile. "Let them call me whatever they want." He studied her profile as they walked. She wasn't basking in glory. She was retreating in a thought. "You don't care about the fame?" "No," she said simply. "What matters is the shot. Everything after that is noise." The drone's hatch opened with a hiss, revealing the dim interior lit by blue field lights. Mara climbed in, settling her rifle case at her feet. Brogan lingered outside for a moment before stepping up beside her. "I've seen hundreds of shooters," he said quietly. "None of them ever made the desert stop breathing." She looked at him, uncertain how to respond. There was sincerity in his tone, but also something else, recognition. He'd witnessed enough war to know when someone had crossed a threshold between skill and something harder to name. "I just did my job," she said. Brogan smiled. "Yeah, but you did it in a way that makes everyone else question theirs." The drone lifted off, engines thrumming softly. Below them, the range receded into a haze of gold and dust. Through the open hatch, Mara watched the horizon blur, her reflection merging with the sky. The quiet returned, wrapping around her like armor. She didn't know why that shot mattered so much, only that it did. Somewhere in the data logs, it would be analyzed, dissected, turned into numbers. But for her, it was simpler. It was a reminder that humans, fragile as they were, still had an edge nothing else could replicate. As the drone climbed higher, the first stars appeared over the desert. Brogan leaned back in his seat, glancing at her. "You ever wonder what happens when instinct and machine finally meet halfway?" She didn't look away from the stars. "That's when we stop being human," she said. Brogan considered that, then nodded slowly. "Then here's hoping we stay messy a little longer." Mara allowed herself a quiet breath of agreement. The transport banked east toward the base, engines humming a steady rhythm beneath her boots. The desert faded into night, but she could still feel the weight of the rifle against her shoulder, the echo of the trigger beneath her finger. Whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain. Something had shifted out there on the range. The universe had noticed. The debriefing chamber aboard Outpost Arcturus was quiet except for the soft hum of servers and the faint hiss of recycled air. Banks of holographic displays hovered in the dim light, each looping the same fragment of footage. A railcoil slug cutting through a storm of distortion, its path bending infinitesimally before striking the target 3,600 meters away. Engineers, tacticians, and alien analysts clustered around the projection, arguing in low, clipped voices. The clip replayed again. No one could explain the correction mid-flight. Lieutenant Mara Vance stood at the edge of the room, arms folded, listening but not speaking. She had been summoned for technical clarification, though everyone already knew the truth. There was nothing technical about what she'd done. It was instinct, not algorithm. Instinct didn't leave a data trail. A Zalorian scientist, his carapace glinting beneath the sterile light, turned toward her. "Lieutenant, your neural feed shows anticipatory spikes preceding environmental fluctuation by 4.3 seconds. That is before the turbulence occurred." "How?" Mara regarded the question for a moment before answering. "I didn't predict it. I recognized it." "Recognized what?" "The pattern of disorder." The alien's mandibles twitched. "Disorder has no pattern." She almost smiled. "Then maybe that's the difference between us." Across the room, Commander Brogan watched the exchange with arms crossed and an expression that mixed pride with unease. The demonstration had gone further than he'd imagined. The coalition brass wanted answers, but what they were really asking was how humans kept doing things that machines couldn't. The unspoken question, how to bottle that chaos, hung in the air like a storm cloud. The door slid open, and Admiral 7 entered, tall and sharp as a blade. Half her body shimmered with augmentics that pulsed faintly under her uniform. "Lieutenant Vance," she said, her tone even but cold, "your performance has generated considerable interest. Some of our coalition partners are suggesting your methods be standardized. Mara lifted a brow. You want to train intuition? Train it, replicate it, study it, whatever proves feasible. Savant stepped closer, eyes narrowing. The coalition believes human unpredictability could serve as a tactical asset if disciplined properly. Brogan gave a low chuckle. Good luck disciplining that. The admiral ignored him. Lieutenant, we will be conducting neural mapping trials. You will participate. Mara hesitated. If you try to quantify it, you'll break it. Savant's jaw tightened. That's not your concern. It is, Mara said, more firmly now. Because what happened out there wasn't just about reflexes. It was about being willing to trust what can't be proven. You turn that into code, and you'll lose what made it work. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the steady hum of the databanks. Then Brogan spoke, quiet but resolute. She's right, Admiral. We keep trying to make people fit systems that were built to replace them. Maybe this time, we let the human side lead for once. Savant's gaze shifted between them, assessing. Finally, she exhaled, the tension easing fractionally. You two may have a point, but the coalition will not be satisfied with trusting what can't be proven. They want results. She turned toward Mara again. You've been reassigned to a new unit, Project Instinct Protocol. Effective immediately. The words hit with the weight of inevitability. Mara didn't argue. Understood, she said softly. When the Admiral left, the silence that followed felt heavier than before. Brogan approached, his voice low. Instinct Protocol? Sounds like they're naming it after you. She shook her head. They're naming it after something they still don't understand. He studied her expression. You could refuse the assignment. I could, she said, but someone else would take it, and they might think it's about control instead of awareness. Brogan nodded slowly, respecting the resolve behind her calm. Then make sure they learn the right lesson. Later that evening, Mara sat alone in the observation deck overlooking the desert. The suns had dipped below the horizon, and the sands shimmered under the pale blue glow of the planet's larger moon. From this height, the training range looked small, a scattering of scars across an endless plain. She could still see where the target drone had fallen, a faint metallic glint buried in the sand. Her reflection stared back from the glass. Tired, still, unreadable. The day's noise had quieted, leaving only the echo of that single shot in her memory. She wondered what the aliens had seen when they analyzed her pulse and neural data. To her, it had been simple. The world had stopped moving for half a second, and in that pause, she'd understood exactly where the bullet needed to go. No simulation could capture that. The door behind her hissed open, and Brogan stepped in, carrying 2 cups of synth coffee. Thought you might need this, he said, handing her one. Thanks. She took a sip. It tasted faintly of iron and smoke. He leaned against the railing beside her. You ever get tired of proving them wrong? Every day, she said. But you still do it. She gave a quiet shrug. Someone has to remind them that humans aren't just another algorithm with legs. Brogan chuckled softly, then grew thoughtful. They're scared, you know, not of you specifically, of what you represent. They built a galaxy around predictability, and we keep breaking it. Maybe that's what we're supposed to do, she said. Break things so they can grow stronger. He looked at her for a long moment. You sound like someone who's already made peace with chaos. Chaos doesn't ask for peace, she said. It asks for understanding. The two of them stood in silence, watching dust devils twist across the dark sands below. The wind howled faintly against the outpost walls. After a while, Brogan straightened. You'll do fine in that new unit, he said. Just remember one thing. Don't let them turn instinct into orders. She smiled faintly. You know I won't. He left her then, his footsteps fading into the corridor. Alone again, Mara turned her gaze back to the desert. Somewhere out there, the wind was still shifting, carrying stories of what had happened on the range. Maybe the aliens would archive it as an anomaly, a data point too messy to categorize. Maybe humans would call it luck. But to her, it was proof of something older and deeper, the ability to sense the rhythm beneath the noise, the heartbeat hidden in the storm. She finished the last of her coffee and set the cup aside. The stars had begun to brighten, sharp and innumerable. Each one was a reminder that that somewhere beyond those lights, someone or something was watching, trying to understand what made humans different. Mara closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the thin, dry air. She felt the faint vibrations of the base beneath her boots, the pulse of machinery and life intertwined. Tomorrow would bring new orders, new scrutiny, maybe even new challenges meant to measure the unmeasurable. But tonight, she allowed herself stillness. When she finally turned to leave, the stars reflected faintly in the glass behind her, forming the outline of a scope's crosshair across a reflection. She smiled at the coincidence. Maybe the universe had a sense of humor after all. As the door sealed shut behind her, the range lights flickered once across the sand, a ghostly reminder of that perfect shot. The moment when a quiet woman and a streak of light had forced the galaxy to reconsider what it thought it knew about human limits. The night swallowed the desert, and the silence felt like possibility.